Hello, welcome for more Report of Horror. Before we begin, I'd love to know where you're watching from and what time it is now. Get comfortable, put on your headphones, and try not to be overcome by fear. Stories of haunted houses and ghostly apparitions have always stirred fear and curiosity within people. Do spirits truly wander among us? Are these merely illusions of our frightened minds, or is there something beyond our comprehension? Today, I bring you 3 true stories of houses that hold dark secrets and terrifying encounters with entities from another world. These accounts don't come from horror movies or fiction, but from ordinary people who have lived through disturbing experiences. Are you prepared? Before we begin, I ask you to turn off the lights, put on your headphones, and be ready to feel the presence of the unexplainable. From this moment on, your view of the spiritual world may change forever. Now, let's get to the stories. Story 1. The Victorian House, Charleston. In the small town of Charleston, South Carolina, a family bought a historic Victorian house, eager to start a new chapter in their lives. The couple, Mark and Julia, along with their 2 children, were happy until they started to notice strange things. The first signs were subtle. Doors that would open on their own, shadows in the corner of their eyes, and the uneasy feeling of being watched. However, as the weeks passed, the paranormal activity intensified. Julia started hearing whispers at night, soft voices that seemed to come from inside the walls. She couldn't understand what they were saying, but she felt they were trying to communicate. One night, when Mark was away on a business trip, Julia heard heavy footsteps in the hallway. Thinking it was one of her children, she got up to check. But when she opened her bedroom door, she saw a dark figure standing at the end of the hallway. It was tall, with no visible facial features, and upon realizing it had been noticed, disappeared into the darkness. The height of terror came when their youngest son, Noah, started talking to someone invisible. "The man in the corner of my room said he's trapped here," the boy revealed. Julia, desperate, called a paranormal activity expert who, upon investigating the house, found records of a man being murdered there in the 19th century. He had been locked in a basement and died slowly. After an exorcism conducted by a local priest, the whispers stopped. But to this day, the new residents report strange noises during the early morning hours. Story 2. The Gothic Hotel, England. This story happened in an old hotel in England, famous for its Gothic architecture, and of course, the rumors that it was haunted. A young woman named Samantha booked a room there during a business trip. Room 306 seemed ordinary, but as she settled in, she noticed something strange. The bathroom mirror was always fogged up, even without anyone using the hot water. On the first night, Samantha woke up with the feeling that someone was in her room. She heard a faint whisper, but when she turned on the light, she saw nothing. Thinking it was just the result of fatigue, she went back to sleep. The next night, while brushing her teeth, she noticed that the mirror seemed to reflect a shadow that shouldn't have been there. But the real terror came on the 3rd day. Around 3 in the morning, Samantha woke up suddenly. Her body was paralyzed, as if something was on top of her. The room was freezing cold, and in the corner she saw a woman with long black hair, wearing a white dress stained with something dark. The figure stared at her. Her eyes seemed to reflect the pain and hatred of someone who had suffered greatly in life. Terrified, Samantha managed to move and ran to the reception desk. The employees didn't seem surprised and revealed that several people had reported encounters with the spirit of a woman who committed suicide in that room years ago. The legend said that she was waiting for her loved one to come back to her, but when she was abandoned, she took her own life. Samantha never went back to that hotel, but to this day, room 306 remains available for guests brave enough to face the presence of the ghostly woman. Story 3. The Blackwood House, Vermont. In the 1950s, a family moved into the Blackwood House, a secluded mansion in the forests of Vermont. The couple, William and Margaret, knew that the house had a dark history, but never believed the legends that surrounded the place. In the first few months, everything seemed normal, but little by little, Margaret began to hear voices calling her name at night. Their children, Emily and Thomas, began to exhibit strange behavior, talking about a man without a face who appeared in their dreams. However, the family ignored the signs. It was on a stormy night that everything changed. Margaret woke up to a scream coming from Emily's room. When she got there, she found the girl trembling, pointing to the closet. "He was there," Emily whispered with tears in her eyes. William, incredulous, opened the closet door and saw nothing, but that same night he found deep scratches on the wall that seemed to have been made by human hands. An investigation into the history of the house revealed that, a century before, a man named Henry Blackwood had lived there. He was a recluse who practiced occult rituals and disappeared mysteriously. Some said he never left. The family, frightened, decided to move, but to this day, visitors who approach the house say they hear murmurs in the forest and feel a cold presence watching them from the darkness. Outro and call to action. These stories are just some of the many terrifying experiences that people around the world have faced. Are these just hallucinations? Or is there something much darker and real than we want to admit? The truth is that death doesn't always mean the end. Spirits may be trapped among us, seeking redemption or revenge. For those who doubt, remember, the unknown may be closer than we imagine. Have you ever experienced something paranormal? Leave your account in the comments. And if you liked this video, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. Until the next video. Additional segments. What happens after death? Does the spirit really detach from the body and move to another plane, or do some get trapped between us? Throughout history, thousands of people have reported encounters with the unexplainable. Shadows that move on their own, voices coming from nowhere, objects that change places without explanation. Many try to find rational justifications, but there are cases that defy any logic. Today, I bring 3 chilling accounts of real encounters with the afterlife. These are stories of ordinary people who never believed in the supernatural until something forced them to change their minds. If you think you are safe inside your house, think twice. Maybe something invisible is watching you at this very moment. Turn off the lights, put on your headphones, and prepare to hear 3 real haunting stories. But beware, some entities may not want to be remembered. The first case happened with a young man named Lucas. He moved into a small apartment in the city of São Paulo, excited about his new phase of independence. At first, everything seemed normal, but soon he realized that something strange was happening there. In the first week, Lucas began to notice a strong smell of men's perfume in the hallway. It was an old aroma, one that reminds us of the perfumes used decades ago. He didn't pay much attention until one night, he woke up feeling an intense cold in the room. When he opened his eyes, he saw a dark silhouette in the corner of the room. It was a tall man, wearing a black suit, standing there motionless. Lucas blinked a few times, trying to understand if it was a trick of the light or a figment of his imagination. But the moment he tried to move, the man began to walk towards him. Terror took over his body. When the figure was about to touch him, Lucas closed his eyes and prayed, hoping it would go away. The next morning, he decided to research the apartment and discovered that the former resident, a retired gentleman, had died there years before. Neighbors commented that he always wore a black suit, as he believed he would die at any moment and wanted to be always ready for the funeral. After that night, Lucas decided to move out. But until today, he says he feels chills whenever he passes in front of the old building. Mariana always loved spending her holidays at her grandparents' house in the countryside of Minas Gerais. The house was old, with heavy wooden furniture and a huge garden. But at night, the place took on a completely different atmosphere. Since childhood, Mariana felt that they were not alone there. One night, when she was 14 years old, she woke up to a noise coming from the hallway. They were footsteps, slow and heavy, as if someone were dragging their feet. Her heart raced. She knew her grandparents were asleep and that no one else should be there. Summoning courage, she got up and opened the bedroom door. The hallway was dark, lit only by the moonlight coming through the window. It was then that she saw something she would never forget. A woman dressed in white, her back turned, standing in front of her grandparents' bedroom door. Mariana felt her blood run cold. The woman didn't move. She just stood there, as if she were watching. Suddenly, she turned slowly, revealing an aged and pale face with sunken, lifeless eyes. Mariana tried to scream, but her voice wouldn't come out. The figure then disappeared into thin air like a dissipating mist. The next morning, she told everything to her grandmother, who, instead of doubting, held her hand tightly. "You saw Donna Beatriz," she said, with a serious look. "She lived here before the house was ours. She never accepted that this house belonged to another family. Since then, Mariana never slept alone in that house again. And the footsteps in the hallway? They continued to be heard by all who passed through there. This case happened with a couple who bought an old house in the city of Curitiba. The wife, Fernanda, was always skeptical, but the husband, João, believed in spirits. He said that certain places carried energies that never went away. She laughed until something happened. After moving in, Fernanda found an old doll in the attic. It was a porcelain doll with a blue dress and glass eyes. She thought it was curious and decided to keep it as decoration. But after that, strange things started to happen. Every night, the doll changed places. At first, Fernanda thought João was playing with her, but one early morning, she woke up to go to the bathroom and saw the doll sitting in the hallway, looking at the bedroom door. Fear took over her. She picked up the doll and threw it in the trash the next day. But the next night, when she opened her eyes, she saw something she would never forget. A girl with long, disheveled hair, wearing a blue dress, standing next to the bed. She held the doll in her arms and stared at Fernanda. She didn't scream. She was paralyzed by terror. The girl smiled and whispered, "This is my doll. Don't throw it away." The next morning, Fernanda convinced João to move out. The house was sold, but whoever bought it didn't stay there for long. Until today, neighbors say they see a girl at the window holding a blue doll. Stories like these make us question the boundaries between life and death. Many people believe that some spirits do not accept leaving. Others say that they are just manifestations of the mind. But what if they are real? Maybe we'll never have a definitive answer. But one thing is certain, these encounters with the afterlife have forever marked those who experience them. And you? Do you believe in the supernatural? Or have you had a similar experience? Leave your story in the comments. If you liked the video, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. Activate the bell to receive more scary stories. Until the next video, if you can still sleep. Darkness hides mysteries that few dare to unravel. And between the cold corridors of old houses, abandoned roads and hospitals forgotten by time, there are testimonies of something that defies human logic. Ghostly apparitions. Many people believe that ghosts are just stories invented to scare. But those who have seen the unexplainable have never been the same. Imagine being home alone and suddenly feeling a presence, or driving down a deserted road when a blur appears in the middle of the track. What would you do? Today, I bring you 3 real accounts of ghostly apparitions that will leave you chilled. These stories were lived by people who didn't believe in the supernatural, until they were forced to accept that the other side is more real than they imagined. Get ready, fear may be closer than you think. The first account comes from a man named Ricardo, who worked in a commercial building in downtown Curitiba. He was part of the security team and used to do night rounds. But one day, something happened that changed his view of the supernatural. It was around 2 in the morning when he was monitoring the security cameras and saw something strange in the elevator. The panel indicated that the elevator was moving, but no one had pressed any buttons. The strange thing wasn't just that. The elevator went down to the ground floor, and when the doors opened, the camera captured a female silhouette, standing, looking out. Ricardo frowned. He knew the building was empty. Trying to stay calm, he picked up a radio and called the colleague who was in the other wing of the building. "Did you see that?" he asked. The colleague responded nervously, "Yes, I'm going there." When Ricardo arrived on the ground floor, he found the elevator stopped with the doors open. The place was completely empty. But before he could turn to leave, he heard a whisper behind him. "Can you see me?" His blood ran cold. He looked around, but there was no one there. The elevator closed on its own and went up again. Ricardo ran to the monitoring room and, when he looked at the cameras again, he realized that the woman was still in there. But now, she was looking directly at the camera. After this event, he resigned and never returned to the building. But other security guards continued to report similar apparitions. They say that the woman was a secretary who died in that building many years ago, but who never found her way to leave. This second story happened with Mariana and her husband, Eduardo, during a car trip in the countryside of São Paulo. It was night, and they were driving on a deserted road surrounded by trees. There were no other cars around, just the sound of the engine and the headlight illuminating the darkness. Suddenly, Mariana saw something on the side of the road. A small boy wearing old clothes was standing by the side of the road. He seemed lost. Scared, she screamed, "Eduardo, stop the car! There's a child there!" But when Eduardo looked to the side, he saw nothing. She insisted that she had seen the boy and asked them to go back to check. When they turned around and passed by the same place, he was there again, in the same spot, looking straight at them. This time, Eduardo also saw it. He stopped the car and lowered the window. "Are you lost?" he asked. But the boy didn't answer. He just took a step forward and disappeared into the air before their eyes. The couple were shocked. Mariana started crying, and Eduardo sped up the car without looking back. Later, when they researched about the road, they discovered that years before a child had died after being run over in that exact location. Many drivers have reported seeing the boy, but he always disappears before anyone can help him. The third account comes from a young woman named Clara. She and her friends decided to defy fear and visit an old abandoned cemetery in their city. It was a tradition among local teenagers to try to spend a night there, but few succeeded. Clara and her friends were armed with flashlights and cell phones to record anything strange. They laughed, saying that ghosts didn't exist, when one of them pointed to a mausoleum at the back of the cemetery. "Look at that." At the top of the stairs of the mausoleum, there was a woman dressed as a bride. Her dress was torn and stained with earth. Her face, pale and expressionless, seemed to watch the girls in silence. Fear took over them, but before they could run, the woman began to descend the steps. Her steps made no noise. She moved slowly, as if sliding. The wind got colder, and a strong smell of dead flowers filled the air. Without thinking twice, Clara and her friends ran out of the cemetery, screaming. When they looked back, the woman was still there, standing at the gate, looking straight at them. Later, when they told the elders of the city, they discovered the story behind the apparition. More than 50 years ago, a young woman named Beatrice was abandoned at the altar and, in despair, threw herself in front of a train that same night. Since then, residents have reported seeing the figure of the bride wandering around the cemetery in search of her fiancé. Oh, these accounts are just some of the many testimonies of ghostly apparitions around the world. What do these souls want? Some seem trapped in this world, repeating their last moments, while others seem to be looking for something or someone. The question remains, will these souls ever find peace, or will they be condemned to wander forever among us? Have you ever experienced anything like that? If you have ever seen or felt an unexplainable presence, tell your story in the comments. And if you like this video, don't forget to like, subscribe to the channel, and activate the bell for more chilling stories. Until the next video, if you dare to watch. Since the beginning of time, stories about ghosts have intrigued and terrified humanity. Are they just figments of the imagination, or is there something beyond our comprehension? Many people claim to have seen or felt invisible presences, shadows moving on their own, and even voices whispering from nowhere. But what would happen if you went through it? Today, you will hear 3 accounts of ordinary people who never believed in the supernatural, until they experienced something that changed their lives forever. If you think ghosts are just stories to scare children, prepare to question everything you believe in. Turn off the lights, put on your headphones and take a deep breath. From now on, you may not be alone. The first account comes from a man named Gabriel. He has always been a skeptic and did not believe in anything supernatural. But one night, something happened that he could never explain. Gabriel lived in a small apartment and used to work late. On one of those nights, he arrived home around 2 in the morning. Exhausted, he threw himself on the couch and was messing with his cell phone before going to sleep. The apartment was silent, only the slight noise of the wind outside. Suddenly, something caught his attention. From the corner of his eye, he saw a shadow pass through the hallway. At first, he thought he was just tired and that his mind was playing tricks. But then, it happened again. This time, he was sure. There was a tall, dark figure standing at the entrance of the hallway, motionless. Fear went up his spine. His heart raced, but he tried to stay calm. He took his cell phone and turned on the flashlight, illuminating the hallway. There was no one there. Taking a deep breath, he tried to convince himself that it was just an illusion. But when he turned to turn off the cell phone light, something made his blood run cold. A reflection in the living room mirror showed the shadow still there, standing, watching him. At that moment, Gabriel knew he was not alone. The second case happened with a woman named Isabella, who, since she was little, felt that her house held a dark secret. The house she lived in was old, built more than 100 years ago. In the basement, her parents kept old objects and antique furniture that had belonged to past generations. Since she was a child, Isabella avoided that basement. She always felt chills when passing near the door, and on some nights, she swore she heard whispers coming from there. But her parents always said it was just the wind. One night, when she was 16 years old, Isabella decided to face her fear. She took a flashlight and went down the basement stairs. The smell of mold and aged wood filled the room, but then something made her stop. At the back of the basement, near an old chair, there was a porcelain doll. The problem? Isabella had never seen that doll before. As she approached, she felt a chill. When she reached out to pick it up, she heard a low, childish laugh. Her body froze. Slowly, she raised her eyes and saw, reflected in the glass of a closet, the image of a little girl with a white dress stained with dust. The girl was looking at Isabella with a blank, unblinking stare. Screaming, Isabella ran out of the basement and never went back there alone. Later, when researching the history of the house, she discovered that, decades before, a girl named Helena lived there. She died tragically by falling down the stairs, right next to the basement. Since then, Isabella has never doubted the supernatural again. This last account happened with a truck driver named Rogerio. He used to drive long roads during the early hours and had heard several stories about apparitions on highways, but never believed them. Until one day, something changed his vision forever. It was around 3 in the morning when he was driving on a deserted road in the interior of Paraná. The sky was dark, without a moon, and the only light came from the truck's headlights. Suddenly, he saw something on the road. A woman with long hair, wearing a white nightgown, was walking slowly on the shoulder. Thinking that she might be someone who needed help, Rogerio slowed down and tried to get a better look. But the moment he passed by her, something inexplicable happened. The woman disappeared. Scared, he sped up and tried to forget what he saw. But minutes later, he looked in the rearview mirror and felt his heart stop. The woman was sitting in the back seat of the cab, looking straight at him. Rogerio braked sharply and jumped out of the truck, but when he looked inside again, the woman had disappeared. Later, when telling his story to other drivers in the region, he discovered that many had already seen the same woman on that road. According to local legend, she was a young woman who died after being run over many years ago. Since then, her spirit has roamed the highway, reappearing to those who pass through there at dawn. Rogerio never drove on that road again at night. After these accounts, the question remains, are ghosts real? These people swear that their experiences were true, but does the supernatural really exist, or is it just our minds playing tricks on us? The truth is, regardless of what we believe, there are things that defy logic. Some stories are just coincidences, but others are impossible to ignore. And you, have you ever had a supernatural experience? Do you think ghosts are just myths, or do you believe there is something beyond our comprehension? Leave your story in the comments. If you like this video, don't forget to like, subscribe to the channel, and activate the bell for more scary stories. Until the next video, if you can still sleep. The unknown has always caused us fear. The idea that something may be watching, even when we are alone, is terrifying. Many believe that after death, the soul follows its path to another plane. But what if some of them get trapped between us? And if, for some reason, certain entities can't rest? Today you will hear 3 real stories of encounters with the beyond. Terrifying accounts of people who never believed in the supernatural until they came across something impossible to ignore. Put on your headphones, turn off the lights and get ready, because after this video, you will never see the world the same way again. The first story happened with Carlos, a doctor who spent most of his life believing only in science. For him, everything had a logical explanation, but one day something happened that made him question everything he knew. Carlos worked in an old hospital, known for its deactivated wing. The place, many years ago, was the scene of a tragedy. An elderly patient named So Amaro passed away alone in one of the rooms, desperately calling for help, but no one heard him. Since then, nurses have said they hear voices in that abandoned hallway. One night, Carlos was on call and needed to cross the deactivated wing to reach another sector of the hospital. He was walking quickly when suddenly he heard someone calling his name. Carlos? The voice was weak and seemed to come from the back of the hallway. He stopped for a moment but ignored it and continued walking until he heard it again. Carlos, help me. His heart raced. The hospital was empty in that wing, but as a good skeptic he decided to check. He walked to the door of the old room where they said So Amaro had died, and when pushing the door, he felt an intense cold. The air was heavy, but what really made him run was when he heard the voice again, now right next to him. Please, don't let me die here. Carlos ran away without looking back. He never went through that wing alone again. And until today, hospital employees still report hearing the whispers of a man asking for help. Our next story happened with Camilla, a young woman who moved into an old apartment in the city center. The place was cheap and seemed perfect, but soon she realized that there was something strange there. Since the first night, Camilla felt a strange presence in the apartment. Whenever she passed through the hallway, she had the feeling that someone was watching her. But like many people do, she ignored the signs until a scary event made her realize that she was not alone. One night, while getting ready for bed, she looked at the bathroom mirror and noticed something strange, a small handprint on the surface of the glass. The scariest thing, the mark was small, as if it were from a child. Camilla cleaned the mirror and went to sleep, but the next morning when entering the bathroom, the mark was back. This was repeated for several days, until one night while brushing her teeth, she saw something that made her freeze. In the reflection of the mirror, there was a girl behind her. Camilla turned around immediately, but there was no one there. Terrified, she decided to research the building. She discovered that years before, a family lived there. The youngest daughter died in a domestic accident, and her room was exactly where Camilla's bathroom was now. Unable to stay in that house any longer, Camilla moved out the following month. But even today, if she sees a foggy mirror, she feels a shiver run down her spine and wonders if the girl in the mirror followed her. This last case happened with an app driver named Rodrigo. He worked doing night races and had heard stories about strange passengers, but nothing prepared him for what was to come. It was a rainy night around 2 in the morning when he received a call. The pickup location was a poorly lit street in a remote neighborhood. Rodrigo found it strange that there was no one there when he arrived, but as the weather was bad, he thought that the passenger could be waiting inside some building. Suddenly the back seat sank slightly, as if someone had just entered. The cold took over the car, and Rodrigo felt a shiver run up his body. He looked in the rearview mirror and saw a figure sitting in the back seat, wearing a dark coat and with his face partially covered by the shadow. "Good night," said Rodrigo, trying to seem normal. But the passenger did not respond. He started the car and continued driving. But when looking again in the rearview mirror, he felt his heart stop. The seat was empty. The passenger simply disappeared. Rodrigo braked sharply and got out of the car, taking a deep breath. He looked at the back seats, but there was nothing there. Just one small detail caught his attention. The glass was foggy, and in it there was a hand mark, as if someone had touched there a few moments ago. Later, he discovered that years before, a man died after being run over in that same spot where he picked up the passenger. Since then, drivers have reported the same experience. The man gets in the car, but never reaches his destination. Rodrigo never drove through that neighborhood again. These stories show that perhaps death is not the end. Some souls seem to be trapped in places, reliving the last moments of their lives. Others perhaps try to communicate with us, but not always in the way we would like. The supernatural is a mystery that science has not yet been able to explain. But after these accounts, can you still say for sure that ghosts don't exist? And you, have you ever had a paranormal experience? Do you think these spirits just want to be noticed, or is there something more sinister behind their appearances? Leave your story in the comments. If you like this video, subscribe to the channel and activate the bell for more chilling stories. Until the next video, if you can still sleep. What happens when someone sees a ghost? For some, it's just a momentary scare, something that is soon forgotten. But for others, this experience changes their lives forever. The supernatural is a mystery that science has not yet been able to explain. Some believe that spirits are just illusions, while others swear they've seen something that defies all logic. Today, I bring you 3 chilling accounts of people who have seen ghosts and were never the same. Stories of real encounters with the afterlife, which left them marked forever. If you doubt the supernatural, prepare to question your certainties. Turn off the lights, put on your headphones, and try not to look back, because maybe you are not alone. The first account comes from Anna, a woman who moved to a house in the countryside to escape the hustle and bustle of the big city. The house was old, but cozy. In the backyard, there was a porch with an old rocking chair, which seemed never to have been moved from its place. In the first days, Anna felt at peace. But as the weeks passed, she began to notice something strange. Every night, around 2 in the morning, she heard a slight creaking coming from the porch, as if someone were rocking the chair. At first, she thought it was the wind, but one night, when looking out the window, she saw something that made her heart stop. Sitting in the chair, there was an old man wearing old clothes. He was looking directly at her without blinking. Anna froze with fear. Her eyes widened and her body became paralyzed. But the moment she blinked, the man disappeared. The next day, talking to a neighbor, she discovered that house belonged to a gentleman named Joachim, who lived there for more than 40 years. He used to spend his nights rocking in that same chair. And according to the neighbors, he died exactly there, sitting on the porch, staring into nothing. Since that night, Anna has never looked at the rocking chair the same way. And to this day, she swears that on some nights, she still hears the slow creaking, echoing in the silence. This case happened with Daniel, a photographer who explored abandoned places in search of the perfect photo. One day, he heard of a forgotten church in the interior of the state and decided to visit it. Upon arriving, he found the place completely empty. The roof was partially destroyed and the dust covered the wooden benches. But the altar, curiously, was still intact. He began to take photos, fascinated by the atmosphere of the place. But then something changed. The absolute silence was broken by the distant sound of a piano. It was a sad, melancholic melody that echoed throughout the church. Daniel froze. His heart began to beat faster. He knew there was no one there. He turned slowly and saw At the back of the church near the door was a woman dressed as a bride. Her dress was old, torn, and covered in dust. The face was pale, and the eyes lifeless. She just stood there, standing, looking at him. Daniel grabbed his camera and took a picture, but at the same instant, the woman disappeared before his eyes. When researching the history of the church, he discovered the terrible truth. More than 80 years ago, a woman was abandoned at the altar and, unable to bear the pain, took her own life right there before the altar. Since then, locals avoid passing near the church at night. As many say, they hear the sound of a piano and see the bride watching from the dark. Daniel never went back there, but to this day, when he looks at the photo he took that day, he sees a white silhouette in the background, as if she was still there. Our last account comes from Ricardo, a driver who worked doing deliveries during the night. He had already heard stories about apparitions on deserted roads, but never believed them until that night. It was early in the morning when he was driving on an empty highway, surrounded only by dense forest. The silence was absolute, and only the truck's headlights illuminated the road. Suddenly, ahead, he saw a man standing on the shoulder. The man wore dark clothes and seemed to be staring at the truck as Ricardo approached. Thinking that it could be someone needing help, he slowed down. But when he got close enough to see the man's face, he realized something terrible. The man had no face. There were no eyes, mouth, nose, just a smooth, featureless surface. Terror took over Ricardo. He floored the accelerator and shot down the road without daring to look back. Minutes later, he stopped the truck at a gas station and told the attendant what he saw. The man just nodded, as if he already expected that story. "That's João," he said. "He died after being run over on this road many years ago, but he's still around, waiting for someone to see him." Since then, Ricardo has never passed on that road at night. These stories are just some of the many terrifying experiences that people experience every day. Are they hallucinations, coincidences, or is it that the dead really walk among us? Many believe that spirits are trapped in certain places, reliving their last moments of life. Others say they are just shadows of the past. But whatever the explanation, one thing is certain. Those who have seen ghosts have never been the same. And you? Have you ever had a similar experience? Do you believe in the supernatural, or do you think it's all just imagination? Leave your account in the comments. If you like this video, subscribe to the channel, and activate the bell for more scary stories. Until the next video, if you still have courage.